Maybe this video will save someone's life. Justis Garrett was a teenager from Florida who one day disappeared without a trace after school. The police faced a difficult task. The deeper they delved into the case, the more they were shocked by the motives and brutality of the crime. The perpetrator turned out to be ruthless, and what he did shook the entire community of the county. The case of Justis Garrett. Friday, April 13, 2018, became a day of tragedy. Justis Garrett had recently turned 16. That morning, she had overslept and missed the school bus. Her mother, Daniel, who at that time was 37 years old, was busy preparing her younger daughter for preschool. So Justis had to walk to school. In the evening, she was supposed to return on the school bus, just like she usually did. However, at the expected time, she didn't come home. At first, no one was worried. Justis often visited friends after school, so her absence didn't raise any suspicions. But time passed, and the girl still hadn't returned. Her parents assumed she might have spent the night at her best friend's house, as she had done in the past. They went to bed convinced that she would come back in the morning. But even in the morning, her bed remained empty. Daniel began to worry. She couldn't reach her daughter by phone, so she decided to report her missing to the police. The police launched an investigation. Officers considered various scenarios. Teenagers sometimes run away from home for a few days. But Justis hadn't made any contact, which was very troubling. Her mother had a bad feeling, and the detectives concluded that the case required immediate action. Her loved ones had noticed that in recent months, Justis had changed, which, during adolescence, isn't unusual. Her family had recently moved to Sorrento, a small town with barely 1,000 residents. The place was known for its warm, mild climate and beautiful nature. Justis had to change schools in the middle of the school year, which was a difficult experience for her. In such situations, teenagers sometimes isolate themselves or try to escape from problems. Justis might have stayed over at friends for the weekend. Theoretically, it was possible, but her mother rejected that possibility. Justis was mature and responsible. She helped take care of her younger sister and had never disappeared without notice. At times, she even seemed too grown up for her age. She had no reason to run away from her loved ones or from problems because she always faced them head-on. If something overwhelmed her, she would talk to her mother about it. What's more, all her belongings were left at home. Daniel was convinced that something bad had happened and that the search needed to begin immediately. The police tried to reassure Justis's mother, but she felt something was wrong. Her daughter didn't associate with the wrong crowd and had no tendency to run away. If she had decided to stay with friends, she definitely would have called her parents to let them know. But the phone remained silent. She didn't reply to messages, not even on social media. She was a social person, had no issues with substances, so the theory of her leaving voluntarily seemed absurd. The police checked her records. She wasn't listed in any databases and hadn't been involved in any traffic accidents. Investigators began their search by speaking to Justis's friends. They questioned dozens of teenagers, which triggered a wave of speculation that quickly spread across social media. Some claimed they had seen Justis sleeping in a cemetery. Others said she had run away with a mysterious boyfriend. But those were just fabrications. Justis didn't have a boyfriend and had no habit of wandering through cemeteries. Teenagers, driven by selfish motives, began making up the most absurd stories to gain popularity at school and draw attention to themselves, which only made the investigation more difficult. However, her true friends did not allow false information to spread. They stood up to the gossipers, sometimes even getting into heated confrontations with them. One of the girls was even suspended. Parents, students, and teachers were shocked and tried to help with the search, unfortunately, to no avail. Despite numerous obstacles, the police managed to narrow down the group of people who might have known something about Justis's disappearance. They questioned her closest friends, hoping they could find the young girl safe and sound. However, the information the investigators uncovered not only changed the direction of the investigation but also led them to one of the most ruthless criminals they had ever pursued. The police spoke to all of the girl's acquaintances, as well as teachers and classmates. Investigators determined that Justis had never made it to school that Friday, which meant she had gone missing early in the morning. They analyzed surveillance footage and the geolocation of her phone. It confirmed that Justis had left for school on foot around 7:25 in the morning, but she never made it there. She disappeared within half an hour of leaving her home. What had happened along the way? For days after Justis's disappearance, on April 17th, a man came to the police station. During his morning run, he had noticed a foul smell coming from near the trail. Curious, he stepped into the forest. After walking only a few meters, he stumbled upon a human body. He didn't try to investigate the discovery or disturb the crime scene, so he immediately called 911. Officers who arrived at the scene were met with a gruesome sight. The woman's body was in an advanced state of decomposition, with visible signs of animal activity and the effects of the hot, humid climate. However, the most severe damage had been caused by a chemical substance, likely bleach, which the perpetrator had poured over the corpse to destroy evidence. Due to the extent of the damage, it was not possible to immediately determine the victim's identity. A laboratory analysis was required. Investigators suspected that it was the body of Justis, the girl everyone had been desperately searching for. The upper part of the body was severely disfigured by chemical burns, but one thing was certain: the girl had not died of natural causes. Justis's identity was confirmed only after a DNA test. Her body was found in a wooded area near DeLand, about a 30-minute drive from her hometown of Sorrento. The upper part of her body had nearly completely decomposed, exposing bones, while the lower part, partially protected by clothing, was in slightly better condition. Perhaps less of the chemical substance had been used there, so the tissues weren't as badly damaged. Because of the poor condition of the remains, it was impossible to determine the exact cause of Justis's death. However, the most likely scenario was suffocation. The attacker had pulled the girl's pants down to her ankles, and her hoodie had been pushed up to her neck, suggesting a sexually motivated assault. Unfortunately, the bleach had destroyed most of the evidence, making it difficult to confirm this theory. What was certain, however, was that Justis had received severe blows to the face. Her nose was broken in several places. The police questioned the jogger who discovered the body and reported it. The man provided valuable information. He said that the previous day, April 16th, he had run past that same spot and seen a figure there. At first glance, it appeared to be a man, but the witness couldn't provide any more details. As the jogger approached, the stranger suddenly ran off, as if startled. The person's behavior struck the jogger as suspicious. But he didn't suspect anything serious and didn't approach. It wasn't until the next day that he discovered the body. The jogger himself had nothing to do with the case, which was confirmed during the investigation. He passed a polygraph test and had an alibi for the day Justis went missing. To obtain new information, investigators thoroughly analyzed surveillance footage along the route that Justis had taken. Special attention was paid to the nearby bus stop, where she was supposed to board the school bus. The girl's mother claimed that her daughter had walked to school. The police quickly discovered that this was a lie. In reality, that morning, Justis's stepfather, Robert, had offered to drive her. He was heading to work himself. He did occasional carpentry and construction jobs, although lately he had struggled to find stable employment. Investigators didn't understand why the mother had hidden this fact, so they decided to question her again. This time, she admitted that Robert had indeed driven Justis. She explained her lie by saying she was afraid, her partner had a suspended driver's license, and she didn't want him to get into trouble. She believed it was an unimportant detail, especially since she still hoped for a happy ending. Unfortunately, that wasn't the only lie in this case. Investigators had to work hard to reconstruct the sequence of events. Next, the detectives requested school surveillance footage that covered the parking lot, the place where the stepfather was supposed to drop Justis off. It was also the spot where the school bus would have stopped, the one she had missed. But to the investigators' surprise, exactly during that crucial moment, the surveillance system malfunctioned. Because of this, it was impossible to confirm whether the stepfather had actually dropped her off at the school. Moreover, dozens of witnesses claimed that the girl never showed up at school that day, no one had seen her. This contradicted Robert's version of events and made him the main suspect. He was the last person to see Justis alive. The police summoned him for questioning and increased the pressure. Eventually, he began to talk. On April 29, Robert admitted that he did not take Justis to school. Instead, at her request, he drove her to a nearby town and dropped her off at the entrance, where she was supposed to meet someone she knew. He claimed the girl insisted on it. He assumed it was a boyfriend her mother didn't know about, so he gave in, hoping to gain her trust and improve their relationship. He didn't ask questions because he wanted Justis to like him, he had only recently started dating her mother. He didn't know the name or any details about the boy she was supposed to meet. The girl assured him that she would get to school on her own and return by bus. Robert didn't have time to wait for her, he was rushing to work in Volusia County. He was convinced everything was fine. The police were surprised. Neither of the parents had ever heard of any mysterious friend. It was possible that this person was the last to see Justis alive, or maybe even had something to do with her death. Investigators turned once again to her friends. They were the ones who provided the first meaningful leads. It turned out that Justis didn't have a boyfriend, a fact confirmed by all her girlfriends. However, for some time, she had been mentioning someone she had met online. A man had been messaging her on social media, showing a great deal of interest. He wrote to her frequently, openly flirted, and tried to arrange a meeting. Justis had shown the messages to her friends, but she never responded to them. Her friends believed that she wasn't interested in him. The police decided to take a closer look at her online activity. They analyzed her likes, comments, recently followed accounts, and conversations. Detectives discovered one account that had been actively communicating with Justis over the past few months and had shown various types of activity on her profile. The profile photo showed an 18-year-old boy, well-built and handsome, who had been messaging the girl for quite some time. He complimented her and suggested meeting in person, claiming that he lived nearby. However, no one knew him. The police couldn't find anyone in the area who matched the profile picture, and none of the victim's friends recognized him either. What's more, despite the many messages, Justis had ignored all of them. Still, the officers were certain that this account held the key to solving the case. Investigators carefully analyzed the online profile of Justis's stalker. They checked the phone number linked to the account and made a terrifying discovery: the account didn't belong to any 18-year-old boy. It belonged to Robert Cairn, Justis's stepfather. The detectives couldn't believe it. Robert had already raised suspicions, but now all the clues pointed directly to him. Initially, he had been cooperative, but when police contacted him again, his behavior suddenly changed. He shut down and refused to speak any further. Investigators had no intention of backing down. Robert had already been caught lying, and now his role in the case had become crucial. As one of the last people to see Justis alive, he might have known the truth about what had happened to her. Police arrested him and launched a thorough investigation to link him to the brutal murder. The social media correspondence alone wasn't enough to press charges against Robert. For several months, he had practically become part of the family. He was dating Justis's mother, often spent the night at their house, and maintained close contact with the whole family. Daniel had never noticed any inappropriate behavior from Robert toward her daughter, and Justis herself had never complained to anyone. Robert stubbornly denied having any bad intentions. He claimed that his messages to Justis were just a failed joke. He said he wanted to boost her self-esteem because she seemed insecure. But his explanation sounded absurd. Justice had never replied to his messages, and in conversations with her friends, she described him as a creep. To get more information, detectives interviewed Justice's closest friend, Rachel. The girl admitted that recently they had been spending a lot of time together. Justice often stayed overnight at her place and avoided going home. One time, Robert showed up at Rachel's house to pick up Justice. He asked when she would be back and if everything was okay. But instead of calming her, the encounter frightened Justice even more. After that, she decided to stay another night at Rachel's. According to Rachel, this started happening more and more frequently in the following weeks until it became clear that Justice was avoiding her own home. In recent months, Robert had been spending an unusually large amount of time at Daniel's house. Could his presence have been the reason Justice didn't want to return home? Rachel also noticed other changes. Her friend had become more nervous, and even accidental touches made her flinch. In conversations, Justice hinted that she was afraid of her stepfather, though she never said it directly. Rachel also mentioned that on the day Justice disappeared, she saw Robert. The look in his eyes was so menacing that it truly scared her. That was the first time she thought that maybe he was the reason Justice preferred to stay away from home at night. Still, she couldn't exactly pinpoint what it was about Robert that had frightened her so much. To the detectives, it became clear that they were on the right track. They decided to dig into Robert Caron's past. It turned out that he had committed 2 burglaries in the early 2000s. They also analyzed his online activity and phone call history. Robert's search history revealed that he had been researching substances capable of rendering someone unconscious, including chloroform. He had also searched how to obtain it, and it appeared that he had succeeded. What's more, he had spent a long time analyzing maps and browsing forested areas, apparently looking for the ideal place to hide a body. He was also interested in methods for removing traces from a victim's body, which led him to information about bleach, the same substance he ultimately used on Justice's remains. Detectives analyzed the geolocation data from Robert Caron's phone on the day Justice went missing. The results were conclusive. He didn't take her to the bus stop or to school. He also didn't drop her off in town to meet a so-called friend. Instead, Robert drove straight to the forest, the very same place where, a few days later, Justice's body was found. At that location, his phone remained stationary for an extended period, approximately 1 hour, according to law enforcement data. Initially, Robert claimed that he was on his way to work in Volusia County, but that was a lie. In reality, he took Justice into the woods, where he attacked her, most likely sexually assaulted her, and murdered her. Then he tried to cover his tracks. The new evidence was enough to charge him with murder. Robert Caron was arrested and placed in custody pending trial. The motive for the crime was never clearly revealed. The perpetrator refused to testify throughout the trial and never admitted guilt. Nevertheless, the prosecution had enough evidence to charge him with murder. During the trial, Robert's criminal past was revealed. He had been arrested in May 2019 in New York for fraud and was jailed in Volusia County without the possibility of bail. But his record went back much further. In the year 2000, he served an 18-month prison sentence for burglary. 3 years later, he spent another year in prison for another theft. Robert had been lying from the very beginning. He claimed he had dropped Justice off at school. He also lied about his work as a carpenter. When investigators proved that his version of events didn't make sense, he started inventing new stories, trying to mislead the investigation. Detectives carefully traced the route Robert and his victim had taken that day. Analysis of his phone and his social media messages indicated that he had been planning the crime for a long time. Investigators were convinced that Justice never had a chance to survive. Robert had planned her death. Another piece of evidence was found in his car, traces of plant matter from the location where the body was discovered. Even though Robert stubbornly claimed that he had never been there, the evidence said otherwise. Robert had visited the location at least twice. After committing the brutal murder, he returned to the scene on April 16 to pour chemical substances on the body, trying to eliminate the evidence. That was when he was spotted by the jogger, the same one who discovered Justis's body the next day. At the time of the murder, Robert was 43 years old. Prosecutors were convinced that his attack was sexually motivated. He had deliberately abducted Justis. For a long time, he had felt an attraction to her, but she avoided him and rarely came home. Still, Robert didn't give up trying to take advantage of her, until an opportunity presented itself, and he seized it, brutally taking the life of 16-year-old Justis Garrett. Justis's mother, devastated by her daughter's brutal murder at the hands of her partner, gave testimony against him. She stated that it was Robert who prevented her from reporting her daughter's disappearance right away. He convinced her that the girl was simply spending the night at Rachel's. He also asked her to lie and say that Justis had left for school in the morning. At first, the mother didn't understand why he was asking her to do that. She thought he was just afraid of the consequences of driving without a license. After reviewing the evidence, the jury needed only half an hour to reach a verdict. Robert Caron was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 5 years in prison for attempting to mislead investigators. Throughout the entire trial, he never admitted guilt or showed any remorse. Despite the overwhelming evidence, until the very end, he claimed he was innocent and accused the authorities of injustice. Thank you for watching this video. Share your thoughts in the comments and leave a like if you found this story interesting. Don't forget to click the notification bell. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones, stay safe.